Okay. And of course, I did not. You don't have permission to share, Christoph, but you do now. Well, you do now. All right, there you go. You should be able to share.
Okay, let me select the right screen, hopefully that one. Oh, and can you still hear me? Because it's so quiet.
Yeah, we got you.
Good. Okay,
Yeah.
good. Yeah, okay. Yeah, so it has been 2 weeks. Let's see. So what I have been doing, so maybe we can have a look at the status quo. I've been working on a capability provider. That was supposed only one component of what we want to do. Let's see the others. That's here. So the capability provider, which is supposed to do the inference, is IE here on the top right. And then we have all the others. But I only got the IE code done, so to say. And so in brief, it is still untested. But so what do we have now? We have a contract. It changed slightly, so it's not so much wasmNN like as it has been before. It is called predict now, and yeah, so just one single, well, the method, the one single method is called predict now. Then what does it do on linkage? So on linkage with any actor that capability provider collects parameters. We shall have a look on these maybe in a minute or so. So these parameters come in tuples. So it's always the nickname of a model and a bindle URL. So URL to a bindle path. We can have a look on examples later. And then it downloads the invoice and the parcels. So what's behind that? The parcels, there are two of them. This is the model in one parcel, and the other parcel is its metadata. And that's also the reason why the interface changed. So if you have wasmNN, you have a one-to-one relationship, and you think that the user of the engine has to pass all the parameters and directly expects the answer. In our system now, it's a bit different because we said we want to load the model and some other parameters, the metadata from a bindle server. And this is done also. Then the interface, as I said, it changed. The good news is the functionality as it was implemented by the Inter guys, and I think Radu Matai, that is now as very close to the very original version. It is just not part of the interface now, but we can have a look on the code later. And then what we have, yeah, I mean, it's implemented that everything shall work together. We can have a look on a running example. It throws an error. The error is meaningful, but anyway, I didn't get the testing done. But that's what we have. So in brief, with a capability provider, which is supposed to be implemented, I think it's feature complete, but it's totally untested. Just yesterday, I launched some quick and dirty tests. And then if we have a look on the overall system, the other technical stakeholders are missing. I mean, we have the IE, the capability provider, and the bindle server. That's the status quo.
Okay, so thank you so much, Christoph, for the update. How do we help here? Is there some place where we can plug in to collaborate and assist? Because I kind of feel my perception is, and I don't know if there's like maybe discussions that happen on Slack that I'm not speed on, which is perfectly probable. Is that are there other ways that we can plug in to help get this develop this?
One thing I recognized is that I don't have a clear view how to debug that. I had a look briefly and I saw that Mats Brossen, I think, was asking questions like these or in that direction, how to debug, because yesterday late I wanted to plug my debugger and somehow it didn't work. Otherwise, you can play with it. You could have a look at the overall architecture. I mean, we can have a look together how it looks and feels some aspects, like, for example, the invoice and the parcels and the handling of the metadata. such that it goes into the right direction. You can have a look at that, design reviews. I mean, what I will do next is test it, obviously, get that capability provider running in form of tests, and then build the other technical stakeholders, like we said, the RP actor, the interface actor, and then the whole system that we have an example application. You can always have a look on that, on the code already.
On the debugging thing, what we've tried to do is I'll drop it into link now, but right off wasmCloud.dev, we did sort of take a bunch of the feedback that we collected and wrote up a few pages, Christoph, to help document some of the errors in debugging procedures for the hosts, the actors, and providers. That's the way the manual's kind of organized right now. But I'm sure that there are still gaps. So if you can help me identify where gaps are, I will try to collaborate and prioritize making sure that we can get some documentation out there for that, because that's a good exercise. And Steve, would it make sense for Christoph to maybe take you through a design review on the architecture, and we can kind of talk through how things are set up right now? Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And I can follow up with you to see if there's any debugging tricks that might be helpful.
Yeah, cool. Then I also get to know wasmCloud better. That would be super. So I think the high level, should we have a look high level on the code right now? That's maybe interesting if we record that for others. So then others have a big picture. And then with Steve offline or whenever, we can have a more detailed look or a different view on that. So then let's go. Maybe we start with the interface somehow, and that's where the invoice, how the invoice is structured, because that is what is supposed to be on the Bindle server. Okay, give me a second. So that's that. I configured kind of the identity model. That's the most easiest thing that you could use and test. The overall structure is such that, as I said, usually we would expect two artifacts. So one is the model itself, and this is this one, this parser. So everything is in parsers, and that model is a parser, and the metadata is in parser. And now it is assumed, the code of the capability provider assumes that each parser is assigned one group. There's one for model, there's one for metadata. It doesn't have to be, I mean, you do not have to define groups. But the thing is that the capability provider has to be able to differentiate between these two, because it parses them differently, of course. Let's have a look on the metadata in a minute. I just wrote it in JSON. I saw that we have other capability providers in the examples where JSON was parsed, and then it's nice for humans to read. So it has to be parsed differently than the byte stream of the model. And you could differentiate the both by their MIME type or media type, but I think that's not very advantageous. So currently it is assumed that there are these two groups. Each of that artifacts, each of the parcels is assigned one of the groups. And maybe for completeness, let's have a look where the JSON is for the metadata. So this is the content of one parcel. We have a model name, which is not parsed, I think. So it's just for convenience, because I thought it would be nice for users that they have any name, anything you can think of when you open that file. And then we have got everything what you also have to provide, for example, if you use wasmNN. So you have the encoding, that's the format, so to say, the target, CPU, GPU, DPU, and then the type.
Is anyone else losing audio?
It's coming through okay on my end.
You guys are all okay. It may be here on my end. Okay, I was a little unclear on my side. That's okay.
Yeah, it's good here. Christoph, I'd love to. Are you're going to get to the interface?
Yeah, that's the user interface, so to say. Now we can have a look at the technical interface here at the capability provider, yeah, right?
Yeah,
or...
the Smithy interface.
Ah, the Smithy. Okay, yeah, we haven't been there. It's somewhere here. So as I said, since most of the data is now stored on that Bindle server, I reduced that contract or the interface between provider and actors to one method, and that is predict. So what we have, so the input and output each are structs. The input takes a model nickname, so the model, and a tensor and an index. Tensor, I think, was a wish or maybe a proposal from Andrew Brown, who said that at least in inference engines like OpenVINO, maybe the tensor changes in case you want to do batch processing. Otherwise, it could have been a metadata parameter from the Bindle server, but now we have it here. You have an index. So, and the answer, so to say, let's go to that one. Yeah, we have a result status, so it's just a Boolean if there's an error or not, and an error message, and of course the output, so the byte stream, what you get back. Does it kind of answer your question, Steve, or do you have something specific in mind?
Was there? I thought you had mentioned a place to specify the. I guess the model name, which maybe that corresponds with the Bindle group that you showed earlier, for the parcel.
Yes.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
That the model. That's the models.
Here's the model. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. You have to take care. Currently, it's such that exactly this is the model you provide, or model name you provide when you do a request, and that what that has to match is the parameters which are passed when the actor links at, when the put link method is called. So if we look at the example, you always have that provider test config here, and I used it. Currently, it looks like that. I mean, there are 2 lines, but this is a valid example somehow because I just uploaded to my local Bindle server that identity model. And this is the challengers, the name, and this would be the string, the model string, the name of the model.
Okay.
So
it looked like you had on your to-do list. It looked like you had I think you had an implementation of the capability provider, but not the actors yet. Is that right?
Yeah.
So there are some test tools that we have that can help you invoke those interface APIs on a provider without having an actor yet. And that might be one way that it could be tested and help sort of an alternate approach to debugging, but it might be useful. I can show you some of those, or if for anybody else who's listening for later, a few of the capability providers in the wasmCloud capability providers repository have a tests directory, and that an example that might be useful to look at would be the KV Redis or SQLDB or even HTTP client. Those are all providers where we have test cases that can invoke the interface without having without requiring an actor.
I'm aware of these. I tested when I did the first iteration, so when it was really wasmCloud-like. This is the one and only test which exists right now. I mean, it throws an error, but that's fine. Let's replay that. So if you do also, so what's the precondition? I understand that on the lower left I have a jet stream, right? That's one precondition. On the lower right you have that Bindel server, which is the local one currently, and on the right, just for clearness or clarity, there's how the invoice looks like. If I test now, it's at a certain point it complains, and I saw that an hour ago. That's natural because he complains about the encoding. That's not readable because the color code is not good, but it says, encoding can only load ONX models, and the reason is that it gets an encoding is 0, but ONX is encoded with an enum equals 1, so somehow he gets the wrong value. Don't know. I have to debug that. But it's the first test. So what does it say?
That's awesome.
Yeah. What you it's up. I prepared it here. Let's look from here. What you see is that the parcels, in fact, they are downloaded from that server. You see that I highlighted here. These long lines with their hashes. These are the 2 parcels, and it gets back at 200, and it says also flushed so many bytes. So it downloads them, gets them in, and then that error message comes out of the stuff I copied from wasmNN. I mean, I did not copy, but I templated wasmNN from. Overall, I try to be very verbose with that error messages. So they should be very specific, and it is. I just currently do not understand why it gets a 0 when we should have been passing a 1. We can have a look. Then it's, as an example, it's more clear, because in that parser here, in that JSON, so that JSON is comprised in the first parser, and in line 3 it says graph encoding ONX. And now if we go to the code where it is passed, here at a certain point, so it says when you read ONX in that JSON, it should match to 1. Yeah, I think there's a parsing error because it should match 1, and then if we have a look in that tracked, it's still the tracked inference engine. Here's where the error message comes from. If encoding is not ONX, then it throws that error. And it throws the error, we have seen that. However, I do not understand why the encoding is wrong. So, but I mean, very specific error messages. So. What else can we say? We wanted to have a look in the code. So maybe to restart.
Can I make a comment real quick, Christoph?
Yeah.
Sort of rewinding a bit back to the interface that you're exposing. Can you look at the inference request?
Yeah. Yeah, genau. So in the Smithy, you want to see rather Smithy or?
Sure, this is fine.
Okay.
All right, line 47, index. You retain that because I said, models could have multiple inputs, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I think what this is saying here is that you'd have to send multiple requests with different indexes in order to get one result back, and I don't think that's what you want, right? You want to send one request and get one response back. Is that correct?
That is correct currently, because we think in terms of HTTP, right? I mean, that was our setup. So absolutely, yeah.
So I think the fix here would be to handle the case where a model has multiple inputs. We make line 43 an array somehow. I hope there's a way to do that. An array of tensors.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. And then we get rid of the index. But that way, if you do an array of tensors, then the index is baked in, right? If you only have one, it's going to be index 0.
Mm-hmm.
And I would get rid of that index parameter because that's probably not what you want.
Okay, let's check. Yeah,
Andrew, When you look at this interface, do you think that there would be anything that would need to change to support TensorFlow models? Or is this general enough that it could work for
I
either?
mean, okay, just this is like sort of off the cuff, so I don't know for sure, but I think this is okay. Okay, if you pass a tensor, and I hope that tensor structure has the precision, the dimensions of the tensor, and then the actual data. If it has sort of all those things, I think you can do it. That's my sense, but don't quote me later if I'm actually wrong. But you don't need the index if you have an array of tensor. What do you think, Steve?
Yeah, if Christoph, if you could scroll down a little bit, the tensor structure is right there in the request.
Okay, dimensions, buffer size, data. Okay, what about well, I guess Christoph, you're sort of baking in the precision of the model into the bindle metadata, right?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. In that case, I guess we don't need to have it here, right? What is tensor dimensions?
Yeah, actually, in tensor data is supposed to be an array of bytes. You can actually you can actually make that a blob type on line 61. You don't actually have to call it tensor data. You could just call it blob.
Oh, really? I mean,
and then
okay,
in the code generator will make that be a vector of U8s.
Okay,
cool.
and then you wouldn't need buffer size, right?
You would if buffer size was supposed to refer to data, then you don't need the size.
Yeah, I agree. Maybe. So we throw it out, right?
Yeah, I'd say so.
Okay.
Okay, this is good, Steve, because this highlights tensor dimensions. Dimensions are an array of dimensions, if that makes sense. So, for example, if you were going to send an image, you'd have, let's say the images are 300 by 300. So the dimensions, and there's, we're going to do RGB or whatever for color space. You'd have like 300 by 300 by 3. And like, we need to pass that data on to, I'm pretty sure we need to pass that data on to TensorFlow. And if we don't, it's still important that the user has set up their tensor data in the right way, right? Does that make sense? So I think tensor dimensions is actually just an array of U32s or
yeah. So it would be however many dimensions are in the tensor, then that would be the length of the array.
Yeah, and we don't know that ahead of time. Well, in your guys' case, you might know that ahead of time because Bindle could tell you or something, but yeah.
Yeah, that was the idea. So here, for example, I mean, out is, I think, just for convenience. That is to tell you what you get back. I mean, just for the human, I would say that you have an idea, but that's what's really important, what is parsed and what is used directly in the engine. As you said, it has to know.
Okay, so you're actually going to use Bindle metadata for the dimensions.
That's the idea.
Okay.
If you
okay, then that other field up in the previous screen probably can go as well, right?
Yeah. Yes. Oh. Sorry. Just it's redundant. Absolutely. Why is it there? Then I think it was easier for me. I don't know. I don't remember why, but at a certain point I thought about you, Andrew, because in the chat, in the channel machine learning, I think you voted, didn't you vote to put the dimensions into the interface, right? But then when coding, I didn't take the time to do it. I thought it would be easier if it's part of the metadata. because then it enters the structure of all the other data as well, and it somehow at a certain point in my head it was easier. So, but it's redundant, absolutely, and so it's a source of confusion currently. So then we should remove it, and probably here. Or where you
Okay,
mean,
I think I remember what this is about. This is I said, well, if you're going to do batching, then you probably want to have it in the interface.
right.
But if you don't want to do batching, you should rip it out. So I guess that's your guys' decision to make. And I would suggest not doing batching as a first pass is probably smart.
I had another thought about the tensor data that I didn't realize until you showed the metadata. But if that's a blob and you're going to deserialize it based on the data type, like F32, then I think that F32 type should be part of the interface. Because if you've got a F64 or U32 for the data type, you're going to deserialize it a different way. And it sort of feels like that should be part of the tensor structure that you pass over to tell the receiver how to unserialize it.
And with deserialize, you mean parsing the bytes array?
Yeah, so if you're going to pass data is a byte array of U8s, but is that really an array of float 32s for your model?
This is a good point, Steve. And if you guys do this right, you will avoid a lot of pain that I've been through.
Is it correct, Christoph, that the data blob is really an array of F32s for that particular model?
Yes, but as far as I understand, the deserialization of what you mean is done in U8 anyway. I understand that. Maybe I'm wrong, but my understanding is currently that things like the F32, what's mentioned in the JSON, is for the engine. And I think it's not even used, at least not in the tracked Onyx part, but I think TensorFlow has multiple options also. So for me, these are two things, but maybe someone, Andrew, can you correct me? I would always deserialize as U8, and then I would say to that engine, here's your byte array, but you would interpret it as an whatever. Maybe that's wrong.
Yeah, I think that is the case. You know, most of these engines, at least especially OpenVINO, just it needs a slice of memory, so U8 is fine, right? And it'll interpret internally how the precision. But I think the important thing is on the user side. So on the user side, when they're writing their code, who is the user here? Actually, maybe this doesn't matter for you guys, but I had issues where, you know, I construct a tensor of F32s, and then I had to get it to an array of U8s, and maybe I didn't do the endianness right, or maybe, you know, and so if you can eliminate those issues for the user, that's probably going to be a plus. wasm's a low-level API, so the user has to worry about it. But if you guys can avoid that, that would be good.
So I don't understand the conclusion. The one consequence would be to pass that tensor type as a parameter in the contract, right?
Well, I guess it depends on how the data was written. So I guess if the data was written by Onyx into a byte array, then it's going to end up being the correct endianness, because I assume Onyx will have standardized on that in their protocol. So you don't have to. So one thing I was worried about is whether your Rust code is going to deserialize. Sounds like you don't do that at all. You just take the blob, which is a vector, and you're going to pass it right to Onyx. So you don't have to do any deserialization there, but whoever's creating that array you'll have to make sure that the endianness is correct, and the that both sides also agree on the data type, whether it's F32 or F64.
Agreed. Yeah, that I understand. But I mean, that's still valid in case that parameter is part of that JSON in the bindle, right? I mean,
yeah.
My thoughts were, at least me as a programmer, when I shall use something, and so maybe at least with standard models or usual models, or at least with tracked Onyx, I would not have to care maybe on that F32. I think it's, don't know. I mean, it's that format. So then I would have to pass it anyway. It's like boilerplate, but maybe not in a general case, as you say. You know what I mean? I mean, now it's a bit hidden, but it's still there.
I think here's my opinion on this. I don't know what you think, Steve, but I think it's fine. Like you're already hiding some of the stuff in the bindle metadata. Hiding the tensor type as well might be okay. It is okay, right? The key problem is, how does the user get their array of F32s to the correct array of U8s? And that is a library problem stuff,
Yep.
documentation or error. Like as long as you can return good errors that say, hey, I don't think you sent me the right U8s, something like that. Then I think hiding is probably okay.
Yeah, I agree with you. I had at a certain point a few months ago, I had that problem. I think that, yeah, very similar problem. So
yeah, and it's frustrating because,
yeah,
that's
right.
It's hard to know exactly what's going wrong.
That's correct. Yeah, as you like. I mean, I think it's no pain to change that.
So yeah, so I agree with that. I think if you're going to have an actor generate this byte array, then we would probably modify this interface. But if it's being generated by some other tool, especially if it's an Onyx tool, then it doesn't need to be here, because as far as the actor and the provider are concerned, it's just a pass-through byte array.
Yeah, it reminds me of something. If you do not mind that I have a look. This is what we are looking for, right?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, it's in here. I mean, yeah, that's it. Yeah.
Little
So
Indian bytes right there, line 298.
Yeah, right. I mean, you get the stream of bytes, and then in this case, the engine converts it. But somehow this is static. I mean, don't know what you do. Maybe another engine has other options. Yeah. Don't know who has to care then to get it into the right format.
Well, if we specified the interface as having a vec of F32s, then the problem would go away, because the serializers would get it right.
Right. But are you going to be able to vary that F32 to a vec U8 to a vec F16 to a vec whatever, right? Based on the model, because different models have different precision and different.
Right. You'd have to do kind of the equivalent of a union. In Smithy, it would be a bunch of optional fields, or perhaps something like an enum, like a REST enum, where you have either a vector of F32s or a vector of F64s. And I think to have a reliable interface, if your actors are going to be unpacking that or generating it, then you probably want that to be in the interface spec and not have it be a vector of bytes.
Yeah, that's an argument.
Yeah, or else some other kind of code that describes the format of the data, like whether or not it's little Indian and whether or not it's 32 or 64 and whether or not it's floating point. something like that. But maybe I don't want to. I know that our meeting has limited time, and I don't know if this is what we want to spend our time on. We could come back to this point offline.
Yeah, let's do so. It's a valid question, I think. All right. So then where have we been? Maybe in the overall, if we follow the data flow a bit, or shall we?
Sure.
Yeah, maybe we can. And besides, I have a question. So so we started always at the main, and then in the main, the only functionality we have here is that it checks whether it has some environment variable to link to or to connect to the Bindle server. And then just for fun, I put something inside. So I expected to see these log messages, but I didn't see them.
You won't see them because they never run. So provider main doesn't return until it's shut down. So you have to put all those logs before you call provider main.
Before, like that?
Well, inside the main function, but before you call provider main.
Sorry, yeah, I didn't see it. Yeah, you're right. Okay.
Probably the same thing for the check for Bindle URL.
Oh, but I'm absolutely sure that I saw that. I mean, I saw that error, really. I mean, if I do not specify that variable, it throws that error.
Well, then maybe your provider main exited early.
I mean, we can have a look, but I'm absolutely sure because that was the first error I ever got, and I was happy because it was meaningful. But let's see. Can I debug that? I mean, you see some breakpoints here, but I did never get to these, you know.
Yeah, you won't see those because even though it compiles to an executable program, it started as a sub-process of the host, not by Visual Studio. So I don't know if Visual Studio will be able to find the process.
I see. Okay, maybe I will check. I will check if that is really reached. Maybe you're right. So if we want to have the big picture, what happens? So then at a certain point, an actor is linked to that capability provider, and then I understand what is called is that put link method, because the provider we implement that implements two traits, and that's the first one, provider handler. So the first thing which is called besides the main is that put link. So what's happening here? We get via this link definition, we get what is written in in the test configuration, well, at least in our example here. Right, so we get values, and in that values we said that it's always tuples between the names and Bindle path. And so we would collect these. I mean, can be arbitrarily a multitude of these. And at a certain point, besides, I thought that it could be a good idea to have a lazy load, because what's happening, I mean, it gets these parameters in the put link and directly connects to the Bindle server, or at least tries, and then directly loads everything down. I think it's, in most cases, it's a good idea. Maybe in some it is not, but anyway, lazy load is not implemented for now. So, but then in the put link, we have to, we fill our state, and maybe to follow the overall data flow. It's interesting to see that state. I have to look it up myself. It's not much. It's only these two lines here. So 46, 47. So you can have a multitude of actors linking to that capability provider. And for each, you have an actor ID, which is stored in the string. And then you have I call it model zoo, because each actor can have a multitude of these models linked together with their respective bindle URI. And then here's the tracked engine. Under the hood, that engine has the same state and the same kind of state as the wasmN interface. And I said in the very beginning, so behind the tracked engine, let's have a look on that. There are the 5 methods which you would recognize if you are familiar with wasmN, and maybe it's even easier if we have a look here. So this is the trait called inference engine. It has these 5 methods. I think even the arguments are very similar. What's different is the result type. And then the tracked engine implements that. That's a point where I'm not very happy with the design. I didn't know how to do it better. So that trait is implemented by the tracked engine then. But from a design perspective, I think then here we shouldn't have a tracked engine, but the inference engine, so the general part. Because later, when we want to have an implementation for TensorFlow or for OpenVINO and so on, maybe you have a different engine, but they still implement the same trait, no? But anyway, that's part of the state. And so let's have a look maybe, or come back to the actors. So you have a multitude of actors, and each actors can host a multitude of models. So that's why maybe we have a look in the model zoo, and the model zoo consists of a model name and a context, and the context is directly here. So we have that bindle path where we download everything from, the parcels, and then everything we saw and discussed, graph encoding, target, tensor type, and people familiar with wasmN, so graph execution context, that's just a link to the state in that what is currently the tracked engine as well as the graph. So there are 2 main parameters maybe you want to work with, and if you have configured the whole system and you want to call it, it's the graph execution context what you really need. Yeah, and that's almost it. So on linkage, you collect the parameters. You go through that put link method here, download the parcels, and initialize the state. And afterwards, you're then ready to predict something. So that's part of the contract. We looked at it in the Smithy. That's what you do when you predict. I think it's at the very end. So when you do the set input, that's one method familiar in wasmN. You do the compute, that's the real inference here, and then you get the output, and then you pass that output. So it's the predict is what matters at the end, but before you have to initialize your state, and that's it. I mean, that's the data flow.
That's really neat. You had said you weren't sure about having that trait for the tracked engine. You could, if you needed to expand that to support OpenVINO or TensorFlow or something, you could make that an enum, and all of the variants of the enum could implement the same interface. So yeah, then in the, let's see, is it, I don't remember which file it was, but in that, the place where you had the provider instance data with the hash map, you could have arc of box of that interface. Yes, they're line 47. So that engine could be arc of box of your trait, or else it could be arc of the enum. Either way. Anyway, that's something else. So the design you have could work fine. But we could make that slightly generalized to handle different engines.
I mean, in a traditionally say, oh, p-sense, that would be the case for inheritance, right? But it feels like, I mean, it's not so much Rust idiomatic, but I didn't get, I was in a hurry and I didn't get a good solution so quickly, but I think it's a point to change.
Great. And then, yeah, I definitely want to follow up about the vector of F32s. I think that would be I think we want to do that in the interface. So there's we have 8 minutes left in the hour. How do people feel about this? Do you want to keep talking about this, or do you want to? Are there other topics people want to talk about?
My perception is that the sort of like detailed review that we're doing together here is perfect, and maybe I don't know, Christoph, if you think it's helpful if Steve and Andrew can find time to continue this, or if we've gone through this enough, or if we can do it asynchronously. Andrew, I think your experience having done this a few times, the comments that I heard you making in the beginning about like your lessons learned in wasmCloud are priceless, like literally priceless here. And then Steve, your organization that you're bringing an expertise around the wasmCloud way of doing these things, I think is also super helpful. So I thought this meeting becoming a working session has been super productive and helpful. And Christoph, what are your thoughts? What do you think?
I was a bit disappointed about that whole sprint because originally I thought today I would bring the whole system, but I think it was very constructive. Yes, and I think it's a good idea to get that detailed review further. I mean, what I can propose, there are some points we definitely want to see in. I could modify them, and then maybe in 2 days or so, Steve, I would give you a hint, and then maybe we can have a look on that on another iteration or so.
Yeah, certainly. And as a side comment, I love your idea of model zoo. When I first saw the word zoo in these files, I thought, oh no, I hope he's not using zookeeper.
No.
I like the sort of feeling that it's a zoo already, because we've got a whole host of animals in this one. Okay, that's wonderful. Well, Andrew, what do you think is a good way? Would you mind, investing, more time on feedback here, and maybe I think the three-way, the triparatops, if you will. It's not pair programming. I think is super effective. Would you mind, hopping on and doing some more of it?
Sure. I think my impression is Christoph actually is tracking with what we're talking about here, and now it's a question of finessing the details in PRs. And so I think actually we might not need a meeting if you just tag me and Steve in whatever PR, if we want to talk there. I think we know the way we're going. We just need to, we can actually asynchronously deal with the details. So, but I'm open to a call too. I'm just saying it might be quicker and easier to just do it in a PR.
No, I think it's whatever works for everybody. I mean, so maybe an async review next, and then we'll sort of determine based on the current feedback. Do we pull up again next week sometime? Right now, our next meeting is 2 weeks from today, but maybe if we need it, we can do another pull up next week and see where we're at, depending on how things go offline. Steve, Christoph, does that work? Steve, yeah.
Sure.
Okay, Christoph. I mean, I think part of this is how do you want the team to help and show up. So I think if you have a preference, if you think you would rather do like an interactive walkthrough like this and continue the discussion, then don't hesitate to ask for it. I mean, I can't speak for Andrew, but for the Cosmonic folks, we want to help you get this done, whatever it means. If we would do a daily stand up with you, if you wanted to do that, like to help get it out the door, right? I love what you're doing, and I think this is going to be awesome. So don't let let's hear what you think.
Yeah, I think I would go with Andrew for the next time being, such that I think it's very productive to maybe to post questions and thoughts in the channels on Slack, and then because then I can work in parallel. If we talk, I cannot do anything, and I just have some evening hours. And then at a certain point, maybe it turns, or then we change.
That sounds wonderful. Okay, so it sounds like async is the way to go. We're going to continue the discussion online. Steve, do you think you could summarize, where we got today and drop a note into the machine learning channel in wasmCloud, so Christoph can focus on, the feedback he's got here and getting a feedback loop going? And I know we've got a bunch of people that are interested in chat, including some of the commercial customers are kind of watching this because they want to try plugging in their own Onyx models.
Yeah, I'll do that. I'll send a draft summary to Christoph, and I'm sure he'll have tweaks, and then we could post it. Sounds good.
Super. Well, thank you both so much. And then Christoph, is this checked into your branch that you have on your FinFalter GitHub?
It's the main branch currently. So the old version, there are two branches. The old one is the wasmN, but everything we had a look on today is a main branch.
Okay, super. So this is the engagement point. Is there anything that we should pull over to the wasmCloud repo to make it simpler, or I'm keeping it here? Is this what works?
Good question. We tried to put it over once. I was with Brooks, and it was difficult. It seems that I didn't sign off some commits, so it was headache. So maybe if we have something like a baseline, so anything which works, then we could get it over. Or what do you think?
Okay, great. Well, I'll drop you a note on the DCO sign off. That's required for anything in wasmCloud because we're in the CNCF. It basically just means that you are saying that all the code is, the licenses are right and all that kind of stuff. It's like a legal checkbox we need to comply with because wasmCloud is actually owned by the Cloud Native Computing Foundation. That's one of the things we did with the donation. So I know that is an extra step. And Steve, I think there's a way you can set it so your Git automatically does the sign off for you. Is that right?
Yes, there is.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we'll drop details on that on Slack, Christoph, just to make it so that's not a blocker or anything like that. Okay.
Sure.
Thank you, everyone, for an awesome meeting today, and I really appreciate all the hard work and collaboration on this. I'm excited to get a cat, not cat, and if we get it done, I'll dress up as the dog or cat and see if we can trick the machine learning algorithm on camera. I'll take that. I'll get the costume. Maybe I already even have a costume. I'm not saying I do or don't, but we'll do cat, not cat, just for Bailey.
Thank you.
You're so welcome, Bailey. It would be my honor. I might even have like a whole onesie.
Nice work, Christoph.
Great work, Christoph. This is awesome, buddy.
Yeah, this is exciting.
Really.
Yeah.
All right.
Cool.
Cheers.
Yeah.
Have a great week. We'll chat soon.
Talk to you guys later.
All right. Bye.
Bye.